can't scroll for more than a moment on YouTube without running across a video talking about retro games and GameStop. There's a lot of information, misinformation, wrong information, and lacking information. But is there gold in them there hills? Well, this week on It's All Dug in Games, I'm going to provide you with an exhaustive list of tips and tricks to make your retro GameStop experience a little less heinous. Hey folks, it's Doug from It's All Dug in Games. So this week we're going to talk a little bit about retro games and GameStop. Of course, as I said in the intro, a lot of people have taken a swing at talking about this subject, and there's a lot of hype out there, particularly around GameStop retro unboxings. They are cool and amazing, and by the way, at some point in the not-too-distant future, I have my own plan, so stay tuned for that. But let's figure out what are the odds that you're actually going to strike gold, as a matter of speaking, at GameStop. Now, the bad news is it's not quite as likely as I think a lot of these videos I've seen will lead you to believe, but the good news is if you employ a series of strategies and tips that I'm going to impart upon you, you'll have about as good a chance as any of finding some really cool things in the GameStop retro world. So let's get started by breaking this down. Let's focus on in-store for just a moment. And this is where things get interesting. And I think there's a lot of confusion around getting your in-store retro GameStop fix in, because a lot of these different stores operate differently. There is no GameStop chain-wide, written-in-stone corporate policy vis-a-vis retro games. And so I think what happens here is a lot of content creators reflect and report on their individual experiences at their local GameStop. To wit, some GameStop stores will take retro video games in as trade, some still do not, although at the time I'm recording this, the overwhelming majority are now taking trades in. But now, that's really not what you're interested in, of course. You're interested in scoring some deals. And this is where it gets really fuzzy. So, some GameStop stores, under certain district managers, some regional fiefdoms of GameStops, have strict orders to their stores that anything that is considered retro has to be shipped to the main GameStop warehouse, where it gets put online to be sold on the GameStop.com site. Some stores and some districts of stores don't necessarily follow that guidance, and in fact will sell the retro games that they take in and trade in their individual stores. But it gets even a little more confusing than that. You see, the standard layout of a GameStop store is somewhat standard across the whole chain. Now, I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds into retail store lingo, but you might want to familiarize yourself with the word planogram. That's the one retail lingo word I'm going to teach you. A planogram is a layout of how you put different items on the shelves in stores. So, for example, you may have noticed that in almost every GameStop you go to, you have all the Switch games in one spot, the Sony games in one spot, the Xbox, the obligatory wall of Funko Pops. Well, that's all organized by what's called a planogram. Now, the GameStop planogram, again, as of the time that I'm recording this video, makes no space on the shelves for retro games. Some stores will put retro games behind their various glass cases, kind of like a fish out of the water situation. Some of them still have the old school DS cases, but by and large, there is no, for example, dedicated shelf space to cartridges. So if a GameStop store is selling these things, they, in a lot of cases, aren't out on the sales floor. You've got to go and ask the cashier or ask the person who's working there if they'd be so kind as to share with you whether they have retro games in their shelves behind the counters. You know, you go up to the cashier's counter at a GameStop, there's a whole bunch of slide-out shelves behind them, and they may be storing some of them there. So it's almost like, you know, back when I was a kid, if you wanted to buy a dirty magazine at the drugstore, you had to ask for it. You had to go out there and really want it badly. So if you want it badly, you got to ask. You can also ask GameStop employees, if they're having a good day, they'll do this for you. They have the ability to generate a report of the inventory they have in stock in a store, not other stores, but their store, based on platform. So you could ask, can you give me a store report for anything NES, SNES, N64? And in most cases, it's going to be a blank sheet of paper, but you never know what might come out. And that can also help guide in your quest to find retro games at GameStop. So the takeaways here, okay? Any one person's opinion of how retro games work in store at GameStop is usually only reflective of that little fiefdom in that little geographic location where that person lives. You have to realize that one size doesn't fit all, and you have to be willing to be social and ask around. Don't be afraid to ask. That's how you get it. Just the same way tag sales work. 99% of the time, you have to ask for the tender tapes. The tender tapes don't come to you. Oh, I like that. That'd make a great t-shirt. Anyway, so that is brick and mortar shopping. Now, online shopping for GameStop is also a very interesting bird, and we're going to cover some aspects of this that also apply to the brick and mortar in terms of pricing and how and why they price things, but we'll get to that in just a moment. So, when GameStop brought back retro last year, they started putting up a retro gaming section on their GameStop.com website, and I imagine we'll probably throw that up on the screen for a bit for your perusal. And of course, me being an old folk, I like the NES stuff, so I enjoy perusing the Nintendo Entertainment System section. And boy, I gotta tell you, it's very tantalizing when you sort through it. I like to sort high to low. A few things that are amazing and alarming come up. Well, not alarming, but exciting come up when you sort the games that they carry from high to low. And again, as we're recording this, there are 136 different NES titles that they purport to offer. And again, sorting from high to low, you are immediately shocked when you see that the highest priced offerings that they have are $99.99. Among them, Bomberman 2, Mega Man 1, and Bonk's Adventure, which, by the way, as everyone can see, has the Game Boy cartridge put there in the thumbnail, but I'm pretty sure that that's an error, and that in fact, is a listing that represents the NES Bonk's Adventure game. Now, of course, anyone who has any good knowledge of the NES market knows an NES Bonk's Adventure goes for several $100s, just a loose copy, so finding one for $99.99 is almost approaching yard sale level amazingness. But before you get too excited about it, we have to think of a few things, because there are about 5 or 6 games here in the NES library that GameStop carries, and they sell for $99.99. But if you look at a market evaluation like price charting, you'll see that they're worth significantly more. Again, here's 2 problems. Number one, these games also happen to be the kind of games that you see a tremendous amount of counterfeits for in the marketplace. So for that Bonk's Adventure, the problem you have here is that there has never been really great training to GameStop employees on how to spot a counterfeit or reproduction NES cartridge. And, in addition to that, look, let's just be honest, and there's no hate here, and just calling it like I see it, the average age of a GameStop employee in 2024 wasn't alive when the NES life cycle came out, so they never had that real-time growing up tactile experience with NES carts. So you can't really expect that a largely untrained 19-year-old is going to be able to tell you the difference between an authentic NES Bonk's Adventure and one that came from AliExpress for $15. So why would someone trade in a fake Bonk's Adventure? Well, a few reasons. One, they may not know any better. Could be a soccer mom that's going through their kids' stuff. It could be someone who has figured out and done the calculus that you can purchase these bootleg cartridges for less than $20 and trade them into GameStop for, last time I checked, about $30 to $35 of trade value. So there is some motive there for folks to do untoward things and basically fraudulently turn in fake cartridges. And that has always been a huge problem. And one of the big reasons I believe that the first iteration of GameStop Retro eventually failed and got discontinued. That problem's still a thing. So if you see a Bonk's Adventure pop up online, you have to think that there's a decent chance it's not real. And even if it was, you are floating $100 to gamble on whether or not you're going to get the real thing, or if you're just going to have to get your money back at some point. GameStop is very good about taking returns when you get sent a fake, but you have to determine if your personal bankroll affords you the ability to put $100 plus in play on that sort of risk. So having said that and covered the risks of counterfeits, why again is GameStop selling Bonk's Adventure for $99.99? Surely they know what it's worth. They have actually repriced most of the retro gaming inventory in the last set of months, much, much closer to, we'll call it, price charting. So why are these anomalies? Well, as far as I can tell, and doing a lot of research and talking to various people and hearing rumors and innuendos, I'm inclined to believe that this is a way for them to mitigate risk, being self-aware that there is so much fraud from both buyers and sellers vis-a-vis these high-dollar games. Look, if they charge $600 for Bonk's Adventure, and then someone turns in a fake, and then GameStop sells it, and then has to refund someone $600, they're out. That it's just a huge waste of time and energy. They want to limit the amount of damage they do to themselves when they're taking in counterfeits, selling them, and then having to give money back. And frankly, you don't need the cartridge back if determined or the customer says that it is a counterfeit. Of course, look, let's just deal with the elephant in the room. It's not as much about GameStop not doing a good job. The reality is you're going to have buyer fraud all over the place on this too. What's to stop someone from buying a fake Bonk's Adventure cartridge, buying a real one from GameStop should it show up, and then returning the fake? Highly illegal. It's basically theft, but what's GameStop going to do? So again, they don't want to be burned for $600. I think they've determined that $100 per transaction is the highest appetite for risk they have for getting hit again with buyer fraud. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. If I was GameStop, I'll be honest, as much as I love the idea of GameStop selling retro, I wouldn't want to sell retro on GameStop because I've got an army of employees who really aren't qualified to spot fakes and keep them from coming in. So anyhow, I think that's the reason why you've got this price. So it's a yin and a yang. There's a lot of risk, but potentially a lot of reward if you are lucky enough to be online when one of these things comes in. So then the next question, all right, Doug, how often will a Bonk's Adventure pop up? Well, in my research, rarely if ever. I mean, it may have only ever popped up once in the history of GameStop's retro. That's the thing. Depending on how truly rare the cartridge is, you can't expect it to come up that particularly often. So you're really going to have fast fingers and check the site as often as possible. Now, one important tip I'll give you is when you're searching through any of the particular platforms in the retro gaming session, the default filter for, I believe the filter is called, let me check here, Best Matches, does seem to sort by things they actually have in stock right now for you to purchase. So the moment you go through there and you see one or two things that are not available, you can safely assume that you're done. You shouldn't bother looking through the rest of it. You're just going to see that they're not available. And I do see that things come up online throughout the day, every day. So it's not like they're batched and you only have to look, at 3 a.m. on Wednesdays. It's truly a matter of they seem to process these in their warehouse or update the store inventory once things have come in and they're available, and they're online. Wait a minute, Doug, you said store inventory, but doesn't that mean if a game gets traded into, Iowa somewhere that you have to go there to get it? No, that's what makes this interesting. So a GameStop in, let's say, the middle of Iowa gets a Nintendo Super Mario Brothers 3 cart traded in. Well, once it's traded in and it's available for sale, it's certainly available for sale for the most part if you go to that store, but it's also in their internal systems and would be reflected on the stock online as well. And oftentimes what you'll see, if there's only one copy and it's out there in some random store, is there'll be a verify address button when you go to look at the item. It'll help you figure out whether there's one local to you to pick up. Or you may just have it say there's one quantity left, in which case I would recommend if you want it, you should definitely buy it, because that most likely means that one is somewhere in a store that's far away from you. So you got to be careful. You've got to be willing to do a lot of searching, and you need to check these things often if you want to do a good hunt. So keep in mind, come into it with a realistic perspective. Look for the things that you want. If you sort by best matches, you'll see right away what is available for you to purchase now. be a smart shopper. Do check out price charting to see if the price that you're being offered is reasonable. You shouldn't necessarily overpay for something. And once again, keep in mind, in 99% of occasions, whether you're going to buy from brick and mortar or online, expect a loose cart only, or expect a loose disc only. Do not have any expectation that you are going to get a box and a manual for any of these games. If you do, it's an outlier and a moment to celebrate, because then you truly caught them slipping. But do not expect that when you go in there. If you find a sweet Mega Man 1, you have to assume you're getting the cart, not the complete boxed game. While it has happened before, it is extraordinarily rare. So set the correct expectations and you will less likely be disappointed. Now, before I bring this to a conclusion, I'm going to wet your proverbial whistles a little bit here. That's allowed on YouTube, right? I think it is. At some point in the not too distant future, we're going to, as I said before, do our own GameStop retro unboxing video. Now, a few things that I learned while doing my own shopping. Sometimes you put an item that is particularly that says there's one left in your cart, and you go and you order it, and your order gets canceled. And that could be that you just missed out. It may have been the case where the item sold in the store before they had a chance to update their inventory. So again, act quickly. But I can tell you that I've been doing this on and off over the last few weeks, and I found a few quote-unquote heavy hitters, particularly in the cartridge-based category. So once they've all arrived, we're going to do an unboxing and film it and see just how lucky I am. Will they all be authentic? Will there be some repros in the mix? Will the condition be good? We're going to find all those questions out. So I do hope that you will stick around on the channel if you're new to the channel, because I think you're going to enjoy it. Well, folks, man, I've talked my behind off, but I hope you enjoyed this information. I hope this helps you be more successful in shopping for retro games at GameStop, if that's your cup of tea. If it's not, well, I'm going to assume you just like the sound of my voice and you like talking to me, in which case I'm really humbled and flattered, and I hope you'll consider clicking that subscribe button, because it certainly helps us grow the channel quite a bit. Well, folks, thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you next time on It's All Dug in Games.